Hi, Rudy. So I've had my Steam Deck for a couple of weeks, and one of the questions that gets asked is, what does it graphically compare to? What do people have that it can compare to in terms of consoles or in terms of graphics cards in their computers? And it's quite complicated questions to answer. But what I would say is it's at least as good as having something like a portable Xbox One or a PlayStation 4. It's at least as good as that almost all of the time. And then for a significant amount of time, it's almost as good, if not as good as something like a next gen console like the Xbox Series S. So we're not talking about the Xbox One, Xbox Series X, or the PlayStation 5. I can't really talk about those because I don't have them. Things run very, very well. And I did a bit of research online, and the kind of GPU equivalents that are quoted are things like GTX 950s or GTX 1050s from NVIDIA, or RX 550s and 460s. Um, or they say PlayStation 4, running at 1080p. However, these direct comparisons aren't always that helpful because of a number of things. The main thing is the size of the screen. So the Steam Deck has a 1280 by 800 7.4-inch screen in the case of the OLED model. And remember, the LCD model basically has the same graphical power. So it means that the Steam Decks, it's APU, so the GPU and the CPU are kind of combined. It's not having to run games at 1080p, or say, for example, in the case of an Xbox Series S, that's designed to be able to run games at 1440p 60 frames a second. This thing doesn't. The OLED model goes up to 90 frames a second in terms of the screen refresh rate, which is a maximum, of course. But because, again, it's running at that 1280 by 800, that's a lot easier for games to reach. So you get situations where, in fact, on the Steam Deck, it can run things like, Armor 3 very, very well. It can run things like DayZ, the PC version of DayZ, very, very well, where something like an Xbox Series S does run DayZ nicely at 60 frames a second, but it doesn't run the PC version of DayZ. So some things kind of work better on the Steam Deck than they would on a console. Also, but you have to remember that one of the problems with PC gaming is the fact that sometimes console ports, so games that are originally done for console that ported across to PC, sometimes they're not the best ports in the world. So they can run worse even on gaming PCs. So they can struggle sometimes on the Steam Deck as well. But the thing that I've kind of settled on, the kind of, if you were to say to me, if you had 30 seconds to describe what graphically is the Steam Deck and consistently as good as, I would have to say it's consistently as good as having something like a PlayStation 4 Pro, probably, or the Xbox One X in your pocket. Because with games of that era, for example, like Fallout 4, it can easily do 60 frames a second, all day long. Occasionally get the occasional dip at high settings as well, which is really very, very nice indeed. And I guess you've got to ask yourself, say with the OLED model, this is the 512 gigabyte model, which was about 450 pounds, something like that. You've got to ask yourself, is a portable Xbox One or PlayStation 4, is that good value for money in your pocket? If you can play that sort of era of games very, very well for that sort of price. That's the kind of thing. Plus, you've also got the added advantage, of course, that it can play PC games, and you can get games at PC prices as well. So there we go. So I know that probably isn't the best answer to the question. It is a little bit muddled, mainly because there is so much variation in the way that games run. But for me, I would be more than comfortable saying this is the equivalent of the PlayStation 4 Pro or the Xbox One X, which were kind of the mid-term upgrades of the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And some of the time, a fair amount of the time, it jumps up to something like the Xbox Series S. And remember, we are talking about handheld mode. We're not talking about connecting it to a computer. Because when you connect it to a big monitor, and the deck's then got to try and run these games, instead of 1280 by 800, it's trying to do 1080p or 1440p, obviously you're going to lose an awful lot of performance that way. But as it is, it's magical to be able to turn on, for example, Fallout 4 and have it running at 60 frames a second, or even Arma 3, for example, and in the simpler missions, having it run at 60 frames a second in your hand. Anyway, that's enough from me. What do you think? Put your questions and comments down below, and of course, I'll see you again soon.